Thank you for the beautiful card, Steve.
Oh, yeah, sure.
People. Welcome to this workshop of the Hopkins School Board. We are happy to be back at the table and in community with you this evening, either virtually or physically here in the boardroom. We have a new board tonight, and so we're going to start by having board members introduce themselves. We also have one of our fabulous student board reps with us this evening, and so Oscar, we'll start with you. Just introduce yourself and your role.
Hello, everyone. I'm Oscar. I'm a junior student board representative. Do I give a description or something?
No, that's fabulous. Thank you. Jason.
Hello, I'm Jason Ross, one of the newest school board members. I'm glad to be here and looking to get to know everybody a little bit better and help out where I can.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tanya Khan. This is my second year as one of the directors on the school board.
Hi, Shannon Andreessen, Vice Chair of the Hopkins School Board and proud parent of, well, now one Hopkins student and one recent grad.
Thank you both. Jen Bouchard, Chair of the Hopkins School Board.
Rhoda Marie Reid, Superintendent and ex officio board member.
Steve Adams, Board Treasurer. I'm starting my 11th year on the school board.
Doesn't look like a day over 10 years, though.
Thank you.
Katie O'Shea Peterson, Hopkins School Board Clerk.
And Rachel Hartland, the other new school board member, and also very excited to be here.
Excellent. Fair warning, we'll do that again at the beginning of the meeting.
Okay.
So we have a relatively packed workshop agenda for the evening, so we will dive right in to our first agenda item, which is our Hopkins Public Schools COVID-19 vaccination and testing policy, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Mary Perry Reid.
Thank you, Chair Bouchard, and good evening to board members and also colleagues, community members listening in. So, quite obviously, COVID has lots of hills and mountains, and we are continually climbing them. And in Hopkins, there are a few things we can celebrate. We can celebrate a school board, staff, and families who from the start have embraced science-backed mitigation measures, including masking, vaccinating, distancing, and more. And thankfully, we believe that approximately 85% of our staff are fully vaccinated. Now, we are needing to confirm who is vaccinated as well as implement a testing regimen for the few who are not. And this is because as early as January 10, Minnesota employers will be required to adopt a policy that will either mandate COVID-19 vaccinations with reasonable accommodations with reasonable accommodation options available for medical or religious reasons, or mandate a testing option for those who have chosen not to receive the vaccination. So we do have a COVID case management team that meets every morning, and Dr. Lightfoot leads that team along with our lead nurse, Mary Jo, and also Jeff Goldie. And Dr. Lightfoot is here to talk more about this policy.
Sure. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you. Just in brief background, we did have the conversation as a full board regarding the proposed policy in November. And that policy at the time, as we discussed, was conditional, as much of the workings that had to occur were being done through the courts. And as you may be aware, through the period of time during the break, the decision at the federal level in Ohio has now been appealed to the Supreme Court, but the decision in Ohio vacated earlier stays that had been in place. As a reaction and response, Minnesota had been holding on adopting the federal ETS, the Emergency Temporary Standard, for the vaccination policy requirement and the testing accommodations that would need to follow if you were looking at that as an option within your policy. Minnesota put that on hold, and then, based on its most recent action yesterday, did adopt the federal standard. They have, in webinars that we attended today, indicated that they will begin enforcement of that January 10th, and that they won't issue citations for noncompliance until January 10th. And they will not issue citations for any testing until February 9th. So they're giving employers the time necessary in order to develop procedures and practices to make sure that those testings are in place and that there is a protocol that is understood by staff should staff not be vaccinated or have other accommodations or exemptions that need to be considered as we consider the vaccine policy. So giving you that background, the requirement as it stands is that the board would need to adopt a policy as we have given to you for your review in this evening's packet. In addition, with that adoption, what that would do for us as an organization is it would now trigger our ability then to require that staff provide us their vaccination information. We've been working over break and throughout the course of the day today to make sure that our form that we've created to gather that information is functional, communicates well what we need to have required and to keep on file should the Minnesota OSHA come for any validation and any data requests that would be related for our compliance purposes. We have communications ready to go for employees, and we are working through the testing protocol and what those testing protocols are. We have some opportunities for staff to test on Mondays within the district, so we already have a testing protocol in place. What we're looking to do is make sure that that protocol would be compliant with the Minnesota OSHA regulations. So we're working with that as well. So I know we have a packed agenda, some brief points there, but what I wanted to do is make sure in the workshop that you are aware of the necessary changes while you're seeing the policy in front of you, and making sure that there is an opportunity to discuss any of those components that I can be helpful with for you this evening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lightfoot. As you mentioned, we did discuss this as a board at our last workshop in November and had a chance to kind of dig into some of the nuances there. It should also be noted that this is not coming as a surprise to our staff and our Hopkins Schools community, both because we discussed it at that workshop and also there's been email communication about the eventual need to adopt a policy like this. So a little bit of additional context there. With that, any questions or comments from my board colleagues?
Chair Bouchard.
Director Adams.
Nick, what's the protocol for testing? Where's it going to be done and
Sure.
during what hours?
Right now, we have ordered with our ESSER funds literally thousands of kits for individuals to utilize for testing. We're fortunate that we have secured those. In fact, when I ran to grab my bottle of water for this evening, Walgreens real clearly said, no testing kits available. So we're very happy that we have a complete supply. We do have those available to staff, as I mentioned on Monday. Staff come in. It is an at-home test that individuals can utilize. It can only be utilized for them. We have had some questions about staff members saying, can we use these for family members or not? Because the funds were governmental funds, they are for our employees only. So we do have these testing measures available. It needs to be conducted in a way that can get the result to the employee, but also has a verification component. So there are verification components, whether that be by being watched or there being an app that comes with it. There is a verification requirement dependent on the different type of test. That must be followed, and then the test results must be brought back to Human Resources, and we need to keep those on file. Right now, the testing requirement is every 7 days. So we're working on a protocol that would allow for the test to be picked up, conducted, and be a rolling 7 days so that we would have enough time for the employee to get that test back. We do have some vault tests, which are those PCR tests that we're also using to our full supply level, so we'll have some of those as well. So we do have both options available until that supply runs out, and then we have the newer test options, which are more on the rapid test as well. Employees can also always go and get their own if they want to in a different capacity, in a different place, and that's always an open option as well with the protocol.
All right, thank you.
We talked a little bit about the budgetary impact when we discussed this in November. You mentioned that we have ESSER funds that are still available to cover kind of this first wave of testing. Generally, what does the financial implication look like beyond that?
Yeah. The ETS, the Emergency Temporary Standard, is in place for at least 6 months. So that brings us through to July. And as we think about that, what we are looking for in the data set that we need to be a little bit more acute with how we can get, a good response there is how many people will need to be testing for. And part of the requirement is that if we don't get vaccination information, we have to treat individuals who haven't provided that information as if they are not, and so we have to test there as well. So we may see a larger population in February, we may not see that population in April and May. And that's what other districts who have implemented these kinds of practices have seen. So that being said, we feel pretty good about the kits that we have ordered with our numbers. So as far as that financial expense, very good there. What we're more concerned about is the labor that it takes to do any of the tracking that comes with it. It is a labor-intensive process, as each individual has to be tracked for their weekly test, has to be communicated with, and then we have to do the follow-up on all of that information. Other places that have done this have hired staff specifically for this action. We are looking at our data point to say, are we in a space, depending on the numbers that we have, where we need additional staff to support that, and how can we look at reallocating potential staff time. That labor cost would be more of the cost that we would anticipate on a short-term basis. So that would be the other additional expense.
Thank you.
Chair Bouchard.
Yes, Director
Just as a
Adams.
sidelight, I noted in my treasurer's report, I don't know, about 2 meetings ago, that we spent $152,000 on test kits of ESSER funds sometime, I think, November, December timeframe. So it's a sunk cost right now.
This is just more of a technical issue as I'm looking at the policy. The dates are still for December in terms of implementation. Before we approve this at the meeting, might it be possible to either remove those dates or change them if you have the updated dates?
Yes, we certainly will do so. Not knowing what those dates possibly would be until as of yesterday. We went with what was previously in place with knowledge that we would need to amend.
Absolutely. I just didn't want to create any implementation problems by passing a policy that had specific dates in it. Had to think about the technicalities. My favorite part. Any other comments or questions about this policy? We'll revisit this at the meeting. Wonderful. Well, thank you, Dr. Lightfoot. Thanks to the monitoring committee that worked on this policy in November, and of course, our COVID mitigation team. So we'll move on to our next workshop item, which is our board officers and committee assignments. And so there's a Google Doc that's linked to the agenda. And I'll be updating this in real time as we have our conversation here at the workshop. And then we'll use this as the document that we approve during the meeting to approve these assignments. It makes the most sense to start with officers since some of the committees that people would serve on then would be determined by their role as an officer. So we'll start with that conversation, and then we'll move into our committee's conversation. And you'll see there's a column that lists the 2021 assignments, and then I'll just plug in the 2022 assignments next to that. So let's start with our officer positions, and we'll start with the position of chair. And I am willing to continue serving as chair, and I'm also wondering if anybody else would be willing to serve as chair. Okay, looks like there's not going to be arm wrestling match for that one. All right.
We need someone to nominate you.
Oh, yeah, I think that.
I'll do that.
Okay, thank you. And then for position of vice chair, who is interested in that?
I am.
Anyone else interested in the position of vice chair?
Going once, going twice.
Yeah, this is tough. I'll nominate you, Shannon.
Thanks.
I'm going to put the notes in here so we remember to do that part. And for the role of treasurer.
Steve. What? Steve.
Are you willing to serve?
Well, yeah, but come on. Someone's got to step up to this at some point.
Steve, could you sell us on the role? Like, what are some of the
No.
great things about being treasurer?
Sure, I'll be glad to continue as treasurer.
And I'll nominate Steve.
Great.
Thanks, Tanya.
I would like to spend a little time talking about the highlights of clerk, just so that, should Tanya, or Rachel want to step up, I just want you guys to fully understand all the great benefits.
I'm ready.
So you get to sign many documents. It's very important, some physically, but also you have the pleasure of doing some electronically. When roll call is done, you get to practice your alphabet. So you can, either take notes or, ad hoc, whatever you want to, call everybody's name for roll call vote. That's very fun. And tonight, it's the greatest pleasure. I'll get to read a public document. Since our board chair is already going to be, tied up, I get to step in and do some reading. So if anybody thinks that sounds like something that would fill their bucket, you're more than welcome to step up.
And you get to do the minutes,
Oh, you approve the minutes?
approve the
Yes.
minutes.
Yeah.
Every other week, you go through and you make sure that Elise got it all right, and you read the minutes and you say,
And then your
Right.
name shows up in the suburban newspaper.
oh,
Did you know
did
that?
not know that.
Yes.
So you can have your name published in the local newspaper. So many wonderful things. If anybody's interested, I'd be more than happy to help transition those major responsibilities.
I'll
I'll raise your hands at
Katie.
once.
Well, I think too, our two incoming board members, it is a really good role to learn a lot about board work. So and you no longer have to call roll call
No, that's,
every single vote.
Yeah.
So,
that is nice.
That's
Yeah.
right. We did, when we were meeting in a virtual format, every vote was a roll call vote
That's right.
per state statute. So our two clerks during that time period got a major workout. And then once we got back to the in-person meetings, most of our votes are voice votes, so it's just, the aye or the nay. And then if we're passing a resolution, we have to do a roll call vote, but those don't happen as commonly. So if it's the roll call vote piece that's holding you back, that's not as common. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to outdo what Katie's sales pitch for the role of clerk. But I do want to echo what Shannon said about, it's a great way to understand sort of some of the behind the scenes processes and paperwork and mechanisms. So it's a good learning role.
and you don't have to read the minutes before the board meeting
Yeah,
because you've
done
already
it.
approved them.
Yeah.
It's true. It's a time-saving role.
It is.
Chair Bouchard, who gets served the subpoenas? Is that you or is that the clerk?
Whew, well, we haven't done that yet.
Oh.
Nick's shaking his head. Anyone of
Anyone on
us.
the board?
Anyone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
Oh, that'd be a fun thing. Yeah.
So, who's interested in clerk?
Katie, would you serve if?
I will continue in my role if that, yeah. I'm already filling it in.
We're gonna,
And I'll be glad to nominate
Steve
Katie.
is nominated.
we're gonna move this along. Okay, great. All right, let's move to committee assignments. And just a disclaimer so that our new board members don't think that I'm lazy. Typically, the chair does not serve on committees. There are a couple, like the HR committee, where it's customary for the chair to serve on that, but I didn't want you to think I was lazy by not signing up for things.
You do have a reputation of laziness.
Before we, oh, I know. Before we move into this conversation. Okay, great. So we'll start with our out-of-district committees, which is that blue portion. So we've got AMSD, Association of Metropolitan School Districts. Our current representatives there is Steve, and then Tanya is the alternate. And the alternate can attend the AMSD meetings, right? It's just a function
Right.
of voting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we could have two, we could again have a main representative and an alternate, and you can both attend those meetings. So who might be interested in that?
Tanya, you want to be the,
Alternate?
well, I was going to say,
It's hard in the morning.
well,
7
that's
a.m.
true.
is really hard.
I'd be glad to still get up at an early hour and drive the
You
little
have clout.
candidate.
You have clout on AMSD because you vote.
Oh, I don't know. Sure, I'll be glad to serve on that.
Is there anyone who'd be interested in being an alternate?
You can put myself down, Jason.
Great.
Steve
Now,
and
their
I
meetings
will
are at 7:30 on Friday mornings.
have- My kids get up at 5 in the morning.
Okay.
There you go.
All right, we found the perfect people for that role. Intermediate District 287, so it is the equivalent of serving on a whole nother board, right, Shannon?
Right.
Yes, but my term is for 2 years, so I
That's right.
still have to remain on.
Thank you for reminding me. And then, does the alternate also stay on for 2 years, or?
I don't know, Katie, did
I've-
you get,
I've never been included like on any, I think I'm just like, should Shannon be hit by a bus, then,
maybe,
Then Clerk Peterson is called into service. Okay.
yeah, or if I have to, yeah, I don't know how an alternate would work for 287, but.
So are we comfortable keeping the current arrangement with Katie as alternate?
sure.
Okay. All right, let's move into green. Tanya, what has the MSHSL looked like over the past year?
I don't know, I had that just one meeting, and I couldn't make it, unfortunately. I had to watch it online. I had something else happening that day, so, yeah, I don't want to be on it. I don't think I really have added anything to that committee.
So 2 meetings annually. Who's interested in the Minnesota State High School League? Sports folks.
Steve, have you done it before?
Never have.
I'm curious, like, if there's somebody, it sounds slightly interesting to me.
Yeah.
I'm
Do it.
kind of a little bit committee heavy, so I would maybe do that in place of some as we get further into it.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah, this is the time to start fresh.
I know, try new things.
Try new things. Okay, I like that. I like that for you, Katie.
Thank you.
Okay. Cities and Board Steering Committee. So Katie and Steve have been the representatives on that. Who would be interested in doing that work this year?
I am.
Great.
Rachel. That is something that I am very interested in.
Did we do any in this last year? Because I don't think
Yes,
I
we
got,
did.
I didn't
Well,
get
they
invited.
were- They were remote, they were virtual.
I didn't get any invites.
Really?
Uh-oh.
I'll have to fight to.
So, Steve, you've been on it forever, so it was one
Yeah.
I think it makes sense for you to continue being on.
Well, you could, if you're interested, I'd be glad to.
Nope.
No? Okay. Sure, I'll continue to serve on that.
Great. And Skip.
As far as I can tell, that organization no longer meets.
Oh,
I was going to ask if they've met at all in the last year.
I think it's changing in its configuration and function. So we could get maybe Alex to send the board some information. The goal is to turn it from a committee structure into more of a partnership structure where the representatives from these different organizations are, have more of a voice and are contributing in concrete ways to the district. So I know that they are working on that. So maybe I could have Alex Fisher send some kind of update and where they are with their process.
Yeah, that would be great.
that's great. And then we could just mark it as TBD for now. And once we learn more about the new structure, then we can vote on that
Yeah.
at a future meeting.
But it's definitely not dissolving.
Great. Next is the Citizens Financial Advisory Committee. The treasurer sits on this, so I'll fill in Steve. And who else is interested?
We meet tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock.
Ooh, we could start off with a bang.
Katie?
I'm happy to stay on that one. Sure.
Great. Community Ed Advisory Committee. Is this still meeting as a separate committee, or would?
Yeah,
Okay,
they still meet, and
Okay,
I
great.
would be more than happy to stay on.
great. Who else is interested in that? We can do an alternate, and that's another thing where the the alternate could attend.
Oh, yeah,
of
for
course.
sure, yep.
I would be an alternate
Great.
on that one, Rachel.
And they don't do in-person so far, so it's perfect. You can go online and attend.
Okay.
Excellent. ESAC,
I'd like to continue serving on that as well.
And you can put me down as an alternate, please.
great. Okay. We're just flying through this. All right, Special Education Advisory Committee.
You can put me down for that one as well.
Wonderful.
I'll be the alternate again.
Great. And Monitoring Committee. So the vice chair chairs the monitoring committee, so we'll put Shannon down. Who else is interested in this policy work?
I mean, I'm happy to continue. I feel like I'm just a year into it, so, and I feel like we're kind of elbows deep in a few, in a few things, so I'm happy to continue for continuity's sake.
I think that's a great idea.
You could throw me on there too.
Great.
It's more fun than it sounds, Jason.
I am actually having a moment of
It
envy. I'm going to be totally transparent. That's like, serving on the monitoring committee was one of my favorite times on the school board. It
It's-
really is.
It feels like a very, like, action-oriented committee, which
Yes.
I get, fills my bucket a little bit, so.
High impact.
More
yeah.
so than doing roll call.
I mean, to each their own, Katie. All right, Board Audit Committee. Remind me, is this one that the treasurer is required to be on?
Yeah,
Okay,
and this committee meets about 3 times a year with the auditors. And we've concluded so far for this school year, so.
I'd be willing to do that.
and we typically have 3.
Katie, do you want to be on it again, or
I
is this one
mean,
you'd
I-
like to lighten up on?
No, I mean, this isn't a heavy lift, I would say, and I feel like it goes really like hand in hand with CFAC. A lot of.
It does.
So
Yeah.
I'm happy
Yeah.
to stay for that reason. Yeah, I'm really lightening my load here, guys.
Okay.
Your plan's not working.
No.
Okay. Legislative Action Coalition.
I'd like to stay on that.
I am interested in that, if there is room. I know that there are at least a few people in
We
consideration.
meet every Friday,
I remember.
okay.
Was there were there other folks who were interested in the LAC?
I'd be glad to stay on it.
Visioning? Oh, I'm
I do
sorry,
have an
Steve.
objective to get something passed before I die, so.
Do we know what it is?
It's the
Well, yeah, it's to get board
operating levy.
approval,
Yes.
to allow boards to approve an operating levy
All right.
without a referendum.
It's going to happen,
Do,
Steve.
do you feel good about
This is
it?
our year.
Is this the year?
Every year I feel good about it, and then it gets all, smashed when it gets to the Capitol.
Well, both Steve and Shannon have done incredible work on the LAC, and Rachel will be a great partner. All right, visioning and strategic planning. So this is a committee that was in effect while we were doing our visioning process. We have not really been meeting frequently since we've been putting our vision into action. We had talked briefly about potentially kind of re-envisioning this group. What are your thoughts on that, Rhoda?
Yeah, I think if there's still an appetite and also folks looking for an additional committee, we could certainly use the support. I agree, it was very active during the visioning process. But we could have, so is it 2 to 3 members? Yeah, I think 2 board members could maybe help us think about what the strategic plan externally facing looks like and what a monitoring process might also look like.
Great.
I'd
Since
like to
we're working
stay
on our
on.
dashboards, and I think it could be helpful.
Excellent. Tanya, you're interested? Who else would be interested in that?
Crickets.
I mean, I was on it. I feel like I was like a holdover from the original one, but I would be interested in being on that. I think that would be an appropriate one. And we can have a third.
I am potentially interested in that. I think exactly what the point of it and the frequency is a little bit not clear right now, but I am interested in the idea of it, certainly.
Well, I think the communications piece, Rachel, because I know that's an area of interest, that might be a good
Yes, and
alignment.
that's what
We
came
could
to
maybe
mind.
shape the focus since we really haven't met as a group.
Perfect, and that kind of communications piece with the community is what I had in mind as well.
Excellent. So the next one is arguably the best assignment of all, and it is working with the student board representatives. And we could have 1 or 2 board members on this, sort of like a lead and an alternate situation.
Yeah, I think the hard part for me in continuing with that is like the busy part should ideally kind of be fall and spring. Really, it's ideally, the timeline would work that we would select the next year's board members in the spring, which didn't happen this year because for me, traditionally, fall and spring are my really busy times for work. And so I feel like if there is somebody else, I'm happy to kind of shadow this year, but I think just from a bandwidth perspective, that would be a good one for me to pass the torch on.
Sounds good.
Give it a little bit more TLC than I have in my
I'd
ability
be
right now.
interested.
And then, Katie, could we put you on as like an alternate, sort of like
Yep,
coaching Tanya on
Sure.
what the processes have been so far?
yep.
Okay, great. Thank you both. Human Resources Committee. Typically, the chair has been on this, so I'll stay on it. Who else is interested in this one?
I'll stay on it.
Any other takers? This committee does not meet frequently, if that is helpful.
I think we've met once.
Yeah, in the past year, we've met once. In terms of our contract work, we talk about that as a full board in executive session, like we're doing this evening. So, so this committee is not super labor intensive.
So you're on it, Chair Bouchard? Mm-hmm. Or Shannon, are you going to continue?
Yeah, Shannon said she would continue.
Well, if no one else will step forward, I'd be glad to serve on that one, too.
Thank you, Steve. And safety and security.
We did not meet,
Yeah.
or if we did, I wasn't included. Again, maybe, I don't know.
Are you feeling left out?
You didn't get the Evite?
So I'll take over then.
Okay. It's all yours.
There's no meeting.
Yeah, so I
I'm all
think that
over it.
it's not currently an active committee. would be my guess.
We have been meeting every 1 to 2 weeks. However, we're like truly trying to get ourselves organized
Got it.
at a very high level. So I think as we're on our way up, it would be good to have a board member on there.
Have at it, Shannon. And anybody else who
Maybe
wants
you-
at it.
And maybe you could attend monthly or, you know, at a frequency level that's different from our actual weekly to biweekly meetings.
Sure. Is anyone interested in serving as an alternate to that committee?
You could put me down.
Thanks, Jason. Thank you. That was really smooth. Are there any concerns or comments before we kind of wrap up this part of the workshop?
I have a question, Chair Bouchard.
Sure.
Are there points of contact in which new members can join email lists and conversations and?
Absolutely, yep, great question. So most of these committees have a staff contact person. So what we'll do after we approve them at the meeting is give this list to Elise, and then she can help make those connections so that you can be looped in right away with that work. For some of the committees, like I'm thinking, for example, the monitoring committee, it would be useful to work with board colleagues to get some of the context and get up to speed on that work. But that's kind of the pathway. That's where we go after tonight.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Chair Bouchard.
Yes.
I have a request, and mainly it's because I'm guilty of not doing this. But if we could all, whatever committees we're on as a board member, if we could all make a concerted rest of the board during our board member reports on any meetings or what's going on, I think that would be helpful, just so that we're all aware of what's happening in these different committees.
Thank you. I agree with that. That's really important. Okay, any last words? All right. Well, once I find my agenda again, we'll move to our third workshop agenda item, which is our transportation start times and 2022-23 calendar conversation. I'll turn it over to Dr. Mary Perry Reid.
Thank you. So we'll invite Dr. Lightfoot back up, and then we have a couple of colleagues who are at the virtual board table. If you remember, on November 23, our school board approved a decision to start elementary school earlier in the morning, as well as start junior and senior high schools later in the morning, beginning in the 22-23 school year. And this also coincided with the school board's goal of reviewing our school year calendar through a religious equity lens. So we are still working on some of the finer details, such as precisely what time elementary school will start. Will it start at 7:30 or 7:45? What's the smallest number of buses that need more than 60 minutes of turnaround time? When might we have junior high parent-teacher conferences, for example? So there's still some very detailed things that we're still working through, but we do have preliminary start time and calendar information to share with you, and I'm really grateful to the super detailed and number-oriented brains who have been through this process, Dr. Lightfoot, Pam Carmen, William Pierce, and Taruro Chapunduk. I think you're here with us, Taruro. And I'm sure that they have conferred with other thought partners as well. So thanks, Dr. Lightfoot, for joining us. And who's joining us virtually? Is it Director Chapunduka and Mr. Pierce? And I don't know, Pam, is she coming too? Yep. And Ms. Carmen? Wonderful. Okay, thank you.
All right. I am happy to get started with a lot of information and a lot of detail that I will try to drill down into some specifics for you for board review. Just by way of background, we came together as a board October 19th of 2019 to draft a preliminary draft for the 22-23 calendar. And we said, the board at that time said, put it on hold. There are lots of things that are in process. And so at that point in time, we had a draft of what the board had said we were comfortable moving forward with, but let's be on hold with any approval, knowing that we had some other task force pieces of work, that we were looking at start times, that we were looking at these other influencing factors to the actual calendar. Well, as you're aware, we have given you a lot of the data in detail that have been associated with the impacts of those decisions. And as a result, what we have come forward with here are 2 drafts of the revised calendar for 22-23. The revised calendar takes into consideration some of the elements that were essential in the first draft that was done in 2019. One of those being the approach of the start prior to Labor Day. The other being that we were looking at 2 weeks of time at winter break, and that we were looking at the end of the school year as being not as too far into June as we could get. So those were some general parameters that we were working with. The other parameter that we've been working with has been from community input and from staff input in kind of a revisioning of those late start periods of time. So we've done a lot of that work. In addition, what we've also done is we've really incorporated the start times and end times that get associated with the calendar for a couple reasons. First and foremost is that we have a statutory obligation to a number of days within the calendar, which is 165 days. So that is our minimum threshold that we have to have for learning days. In addition, the statute identifies that we have to have 1,020 hours at the secondary, 7 through 12, and that we do have to have 935 at the K through 6 level. Kindergarten has a threshold of 850. So we know that those are the hours of instruction that we have to keep track of, as well as the days of instruction. And when you're working with start times and end times and the modifications of those, that becomes a formulaic consideration that we've also built into the calendar for this time, so that you can see all of that in front of you. Now, that being said, we'll kind of try to walk through what some of that information is. The other consideration that you also had as a board was to look, as Dr. Mary Perry Reid identified, to look at the calendar equity component that we could look at with the incorporation of some religious holiday considerations and what that would do for the calendar and how that might shift and change that calendar so that you could review that as well. So we have 2 drafts for you this evening, this afternoon, evening, I think it's evening, guess we're there. We'll have 2 drafts for you to walk through. I will start with just going through the set of information that's in front of you. The goal of the workshop is for you to think through, process, get additional information, see what additional questions might be in place. The adoption of the calendar we have tentatively looked at as January 18th so that we can get much needed information to our community about when does the school year start next year, what might I have to plan for in my life, how might we look at what our family needs are, and yes, as well, what our program needs are as we have scheduling and a whole bunch of other activities, registration, you name it, that gets really based on the calendar. So with that, any general questions before I start to walk into the specifics of what you have in front of you?
So just to confirm, we are aiming to vote on this at our next meeting.
Correct.
So this is really our time to work through any of the
Absolutely.
details that we need to. Okay, perfect, thank you.
So I will start, if you will, with the, unless there aren't any other questions. And as always, I try to operate that if you do have questions, please don't hesitate to interrupt if I'm going too fast or if I need to cover anything in additional detail. I'm happy to do so. Start with the master sheet that you have. There again, this is all electronic as well for those looking at the electronic documents, but sometimes the hard copy in front of you still holds, whether it's nostalgia or some kind of visual information, good to have. But as far as the master sheet, what we did on the master sheet is to look at, so you could see the anticipated bus drop-off times, school start times. You will see that as we look at this, that the high school and the junior high, for purposes of the calendar consideration, as we've begun this work, really are based on 2 tiers. The secondary being one tier of transportation, the elementary being the other tier of transportation. You will note that the elementary starts first and that the high school and junior high start in the second tier. So you'll see that right off front. We knew that we needed to build in transition time between the tiers. That was an ongoing conversation and is still an ongoing conversation with our transportation department as we look at ways in which we might be able to modify and adjust. But as we've started, just some of those basic thresholds to make sure that we had a calendar threshold that would work and meet all the requirements. What you also will see are the school end times. You will see when the bus departs. You also see some lunch considerations. We have to build in lunch because the hours of instruction does not include lunch. We cannot count that in the actual hour of instruction within the course of a day. So we subtract that out of the actual hours that are available for instruction. So that's another formula element. Then you will see in green, these are our cross-checks, our really auditing purposes to say that given our calendar and what we've selected in our calendar tool, we know that we've met these minimum thresholds of hours, and we've met these instructional days, and we know that contractually we have 185 teacher days, and we have assigned those also. So that is really kind of the opening summary that's here. We did reference the statute that has this information, and also contained right below that are the specific number of hours that are located for your review. So with that, knowing that this was in mind and what we had to do, we started to work with 2 kind of drafts to begin consideration of really where could we start from. And as I said, what we built from was the original recommendation from the board in 2019. So we worked from that, and that stated that we would look at the start prior to Labor Day. We would look at then what that would mean for fitting in the number of instructional and contract days. And then what we started to take a look at more in depth was, could we look at a different model that would provide for, number one, time for collaboration as part of a QComp component, quality compensation component within the state of Minnesota. We do have an obligation under our QComp plan for professional learning community time, so staff as on a monthly obligation to look at that professional learning community time. We knew we needed to build that in. We knew that we also needed to build in our professional development opportunities throughout the course of this. And we also know that we need to build in conferencing time. So in the way that we looked to start to do that, we did some placeholders and said, if we were not going to do late starts and we wanted to look at time that was dedicated, could we look at a full day opportunity as much of the feedback that we had received that families could plan for, knowing that we would look at care opportunities, enrichment opportunities, potentials that we could look at on that day for our elementary programming specifically. What in addition could we look at that would also provide for PLC, professional learning community, professional development time, and conference time? So you will see that built into the drafts on specifics. So if you take a look at the month of September in draft 1, you will note that on September 29th, you see those days, at least that day identified there. So we worked that through, planned for that, and you'll note that for the most part, we were able to do that fairly consistently on a monthly basis. What we did not, we ended up 1 month short, just simply because of the number of days that we needed to look at with the elementary. You'll see that we have 166 days in elementary. We could get to 185 with that. We've left some room for conversation with principals, knowing that we have not fully flushed the internal components of this out, and some of that will be further conversation. But what we needed to look at was, could we make this model work that would have a day experience, that would provide for a monthly close as we could opportunity? And the answer is yes in draft 1. You can see under draft 1 that we have met that threshold with opportunities for almost monthly gatherings, for the opportunity to incorporate no late starts, to look at incorporating the 2 weeks at winter break, and looking at an earlier end time in June. So with that, that was the work that we did with draft 1. With draft 2, as part of the work of the calendar equity goal that the board had, and working with our equity and inclusion coordinator, Dr. Brown, we looked and said if we were going to look at adding additional holidays or consideration within our community and the celebrations that we note within our community, not being able to encompass every celebration, where might we begin to look and how might we begin to see what that would look like within our calendar? We did build in an option 2 if we were looking at additional time that would be recognized within the calendar itself for celebration. We looked at the honoring of Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Eid al-Fitr. You will see those noted in draft 2. Again, this was an attempt to give the board a draft of what, remember these are all drafts, a draft of what this would look like potentially if we were to consider those dates. What would that look like in draft 2? You'll notice in draft 2 that what that does is instead of the date in June ending June 2nd, it really pushes that then in that week to June 9th with the 3 additional days. There again, with staff days, it really was June 6th in the other one, in draft 1. Right now, in draft 2, you will see June 9th. So it's really those 3 days is what just gets modified. So that would be a calendar option for 22-23.
Dr. Lightfoot?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
I'm sorry, in draft 2, the last day of school would be June 7th.
Correct. Yeah, that's a great catch. Thank you.
Okay.
That's one that we did not put and should be modified.
It would be the 7th?
Yeah.
Yeah, the 7th would be the last day of school versus the 2nd. It just wasn't changed from draft 1.
Okay.
And then the 8th and 9th would be PD.
Yep. PD grading on those dates, PLCs for that final wrap-up. Thank you, Director Peterson.
And, yeah, can you, I think that some of these parameters that were discussed in 2019 predated myself and Tanya and Shannon. Can you talk to us about the goal of having 2 full weeks at Christmas?
Yeah, when we look at winter break within our HEA contract, we have identified and worked with the HEA over a number of years that there is a prioritization for looking at that as an opportunity for rest and renewals, so that it has predominantly looked at that 2-week time. If there is not 2 weeks and there's a certain rationale, we have that flexibility, but it's the preferred period of time that people have expressed that they feel really does provide that sense of break.
Okay, thank you, perfect. Because for parents, it doesn't provide that sense of break. So that was the perfect explanation, because yes, our teachers and our administrators need that break, so thank you.
I'm trying to scan here between the 2 documents. I think I should probably just ask the question instead of trying to do the math myself. So with the PD days, are the PD days, in terms of number, the same on each of these drafts?
Yes.
So the second draft with the extra holidays is truly just that. It's adding in those extra holidays to help us move closer to our goal of calendar equity.
Yes.
Okay.
And to present you with a draft to give you kind of an analysis tool of what that would look like, should you start to consider what that would be.
Great, thank you.
And I will note that in draft 2, part of the draft work that is here, it, as you will note, starts before Labor Day. Were you to look at the addition of those 3 days within the calendar and not start before Labor Day, that would obviously push that a week later. So it's a note for future reference that there are some parameters that if you make these decisions, have some future implications as well.
Dr. Lightfoot, I remember getting maybe 1 or 2 emails from parents with concerns about starting before Labor Day. Did you receive any? I'm just trying to, because I don't remember, it being significant amount. So I'm
like
I'm wanting to
2.
compare notes with
Yeah.
you.
No, 1 or 2, and for many states, August is the time that they start. As we've noted over the years with the calendar, there have been multiple attempts at the legislature to look at, could boards have more latitude with this?
Right.
The reason that we have the latitude is because of our construction needs, and starting an earlier period within construction gives us an opportunity to do more of that construction in ways that generally allow us to access construction services prior to the summer rush, if you will. So that's always been a consideration that we've had in conversation with our Buildings and Grounds Department. So that's been another consideration. There have been years that we have not started before Labor Day, and there have been years that we have. So it's kind of been, dependent on the terms of the calendar and what might work best. So we tried to be flexible with both.
Well, and I remember one of those emails we got last year talked about like a state statute where schools couldn't start before Labor Day.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yes.
Partially accurate. There is a acknowledgement that, yes, the state statute says that you cannot start before Labor Day unless, and the construction threshold of 400,000 in any one building through the course of a summer project is what threshold we meet, which allows us then to start before Labor Day.
So that's the threshold we met for this school year, and it's also the threshold we would meet for next school
Correct.
year.
Yep.
And what we need to be aware of is that decisions that we might make about this calendar in future years, we might not meet that construction threshold. And if
Exactly.
there's no change in statute and we're still held to that after Labor Day requirement, that could push us farther into June
Correct.
with the addition of the holidays. Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
I would be curious to, the input from HEA about, is that 2-week period still as important if we're adding in additional holidays sprinkled throughout the calendar?
2
And
weeks
at Christmas, right? Because maybe there's a way to call it a little bit less than that, knowing that they're going to have a Rosh Hashanah and a Yom Kippur, which are very close together in the calendar. So Oscar, I lean on you a little bit. Are those the 2 highest holidays? Okay, perfect. So they're close together in the calendar, but that is kind of what it is. And then, that April, I like the way they fall from like a timing perspective. They're not lumped in with other ones too much, which I think is really nice. So I would just be curious on that, right? Like, if we're adding other holidays, how does that make our staff in the HEA feel about that 2-week block? Just moving forward, not necessarily for this next one, but.
And we do have those conversations specifically with our education association as well, and I think those are very valid points to bring up and look and discuss in light of what this might look like, especially if it can adjust the end time in June by a day or 2.
Dr. Lightfoot, did Dr. Brown mention any other religious observance days that sort of rose to the level of these 3?
Yeah, we did. We got a celebration of the Lunar New Year as well, and seeing how that might coincide. In this calendar, as we looked at it and did some planning around that in January, we did want to take a look at when that would fall, and that was another consideration for us as well that was raised and has been raised.
Is that more of a Chinese holiday? Okay.
And it looks like it's on a Sunday in '23.
Yes,
So, interesting.
and that was over that weekend in January.
So that might be something to consider for the following year's calendar if it doesn't fall on a weekend.
Right.
And
Yep.
Thinking about our other top language or cultural groups.
Well, it looks
So our
like Ramadan goes into spring break, so that's good overlap there.
Were there any religious holiday or observance days that our Hmong community celebrate that
Well, they also celebrate Lunar New Year.
lunar, yes?
So those were the predominant ones that.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm curious, from a parent's perspective of my board colleagues, how did you guys, so at first, I was kind of like meh about the before Labor Day calendar change. It was different, but then in actuality, we enjoyed Labor Day a lot more because we didn't have to rush home, or like that Labor Day didn't become the day before school started. So in actuality, we all found we kind of liked it, I think, a little bit. I'm curious from the other parents in the room who experienced the before Labor Day start. How did you guys feel about it?
I loved it. Selfishly, so my teaching semester begins typically 2 weeks before Hopkins has traditionally begun, and so it's kind of a gap time for my family where I'm completely, consumed with work. And so just knowing that we didn't have to have as much of that kind of childcare time and trying to figure out those challenges was personally very helpful to our family.
Yeah. Shannon, what do you think?
It's, doesn't have an impact for us,
No?
yeah. I mean,
Jason,
it's-
did it?
It is kind of nice to not,
Well, yeah, because we go out of town every year for
Yeah.
Labor Day, like religiously, and so I thought, oh, this is going to be such a bummer. It was actually really nice
yeah.
for us, but
It
that's
feels
personally,
like
right?
More like a holiday.
Right. Jason, how about for you?
I think it worked out well for us. Yeah, I think, to Jen's point, not having to worry about what do you do when the camp ends and school hasn't started yet, so.
Yeah.
Did your family have any issues with it?
We had no issues and did feel a bit more like that holiday was a holiday that came in the school year, and it was nice to have a kind of a 4-day week the following week.
I was just curious, because, yeah, I think it's that whole, it's different. But, yeah, I was trepidatious at first and a little meh, but I ended up liking it, so. Okay, just curious.
Nick, I'm wondering about, I just want to make sure that if we add these holidays, that it actually is kind of getting to the equity point, in that, is 1 day off sufficient? Is that, or is it more that I guess I don't want this to be performative. I want it to actually have an impact for our families. So just wondering if we have any sort of feedback from families that engage in these community celebrations, if it would actually alleviate any of the issues that they've been struggling with.
I can speak on that a little bit as a student who has had this issue.
Yes.
It would help. For at least Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, those are really, it's a 1-day holiday each. There's other stuff with it if you're much, much more religious, but having that day off would be very helpful, it would.
Great, thank you, Oscar.
Yeah, I would think that, and I know we don't have a ton of time for it, but bringing it to our groups, I'm totally spacing the name of all of our liaison groups, right? To see, yeah, I think that's a really good question, Shannon, like, is this the right day? Or would it be, is it usually an evening celebration? Would the next, just those types of
Yeah.
questions around, because I'm.
Is there traditionally travel around it? Would 2 days be better? Those kinds of, and I have some of the students on the Equity Inclusion Advisory Group have agreed to help us inform this discussion. So I love having this draft so I can bring it to them and get some feedback.
Absolutely.
So.
Excellent.
And I do think it's a very relevant point. And when we worked with our religion in the schools policy, getting feedback and input from our faith communities as well, leaders within those communities, certainly input that we can gather as we think about the information to bring again to you on the 18th.
Great, thank you.
So you brought us two drafts, draft 1 and draft 2, and are you looking for direction this evening on which draft we'd like to move forward on, just so we're clear on that?
I think that's always the dialogue and discussion with the board. Sometimes as people look at these, they trigger questions about, well, what about draft 3? And you've already kind of done that maybe a little bit. If you say, well, hey, might we end a little bit earlier in June if we come back on the 4th of January, then... So those kinds of tweaks and those kinds of items are also helpful and relevant as well. And so just so you know, our additional level of input is that we are gaining additional input from the HEA and their governing board. They review that on Monday to give us feedback. A lot of their feedback is on, start times, here they are. What do our quarters look like? How have these items been placed for their instructional value? So they look at that item and that consideration as well. In addition, our principals and looking at where the placement of these professional development days as well. What does it look like for our conferencing structures? So they are, and I have shared this with all of those groups as well, gathering additional input as well. And we'll have that additional input for you on the 18th.
And one other question, Nick, on this one with the draft one with extra PD days, is it extra PD days because we're doing away with late starts? Did I hear you say that?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
I know, we're gonna have so many happy parents and caregivers when it comes to that
Well, and I
decision.
think, and hopefully, as we look at those, creating different opportunities and options for what enrichment might look like on September 29th. What other kinds of opportunities can we be thinking through for that time, whether they be virtual, whether they be in person, whether they be a whole set of pieces, and knowing now what these dates might be might give us some additional opportunities to kind of rethink what those connected points might look like for those days. And meet the needs of that cherished time for educators to be with one another in that collaborative experience, which we know from research really lends such a value if we can embed it and keep it consistent.
Nick, do you know if this work is groundbreaking for Minnesota school calendars, or are there other districts that have holidays that are not Christian?
I don't know of many. Sometimes you may get more charter programs than public programs, depending on specific populations within charter programs. I am not familiar with many that would go to like an option 2 to that level.
Maybe I can ask AMSD people on Thursday.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great idea. I know it's been done in other states. There's some work in Michigan, I believe, Wisconsin.
California.
Yeah. Yes. So, so it's great. So I think, what I've heard from the conversation is that we want to move forward with draft 2 that has the holidays embedded, and then take a look at this question of the full 2 weeks.
Well, and I think moving forward, I don't know, June 7th doesn't feel like an extremely late, but if moving forward, we were looking like this was going to move us into like the 12th or the 13th potentially, but for this calendar, June 7th doesn't feel, but I would just want to know, is there flexibility with that too, if the calendar didn't align? But I feel like it does here. The other thing that I'll say just from a, sometimes it's really nice when Hopkins has days off that other schools don't. I love when we have that because we can do things And it's not like everybody in the whole world is going to the park that day or is going to Minnehaha Falls that day because it's everybody's day off. I think there's a lot of value in that and being able to embrace days off that aren't traditional.
Yes, I agree.
One question I would have too is, I do love the layout of the conferences those few days before MEA. Is there a reason we don't have the conferences for the junior high and the high school before MEA as well?
When you look at the high school is on quarters. And generally, this is, as the feedback that we've received from families and from educators, is that having the conference before the end of the quarter is really essential. And so when we look at the period in which that would fall on the draft, you'll see that the high school quarters, if you look at quarter one, it ends 11/1, just in our draft models that we've looked at. So we try to have conferences close to midpoints or half points. Much of our 7-9 program is on semesters, so we try to have that near those midpoints. Could there be flexibility? Could we look at that with a junior high? Absolutely, on that week. We, of course, take advice and counsel from, the junior high instructors and the program and looking and seeing where they feel that has some additional value. And then the high school is on terms, so that's a quarter component, and so that's why you'll see that in September. We certainly can look at that, but with only 1 week left in a term to get information or work with a family doesn't give a lot of time if there are really some, additional measures or options or opportunities or activities that could also benefit the learning that's occurring in that quarter.
But it's the week later.
What's that?
I guess it makes sense, but the conferences are a week later, so technically, we'd be scooting them earlier. So that would even give them more time before the end of the,
For junior high, yes. For high school, no.
oh, because high school's up on that
Right.
September 30th date?
Mm-hmm.
Got it. I also think that there's something about when, the families who are going to have kids in that K-6 and then kids in that 7-12, when you have different days off, that can get tough to juggle when, high school kids are off and elementary school kids aren't or something like that. But just curious on that. I don't mean to rework your whole calendar, Nick, sorry.
Oh,
I'll
no,
shut up.
go right ahead.
I'm
That's
just
the
curious on
joy
this,
of
too.
it all.
Because when we joined the board, Shannon, they were like, the calendars were set. This is the first time we've ever, like,
Exactly.
so I'm just kind of curious on some of the rationale on this stuff, too.
Absolutely.
good.
No, this is the opportunity to engage, to ask questions, and as you have those along the way, I know these are incredibly detailed. As you get questions from the community, we can respond to those also. It's really the opportunity for you to look at it, understand it, and that's why we try to present it ahead of time. And in normal calendar adoptions, we try 2 cycles so that the board has the opportunity to have a workshop, then go and first read, approve, and then say, did we have buyer's remorse? Did we do it all right? Everything okay? And then approve in a second. The only reason that we don't have that set up this time is in part because of the need for communities. In fact, we've had numerous already saying, hey, I have to register for my camp like now, and there's a waiting list if I don't get in like January 4th. So we get some of those, and like I've said, lots of places have to register a year in advance for some of the facility rentals and all the other items that go along with it as well.
I remember my first year on the board, I was so blown away by how much work goes into the calendar. Like, I have this vivid memory of sitting right there where Rachel's sitting and being like, whoa, I had no idea all of the different layers and contract considerations. And now, as we really act on our commitment to be more equitable in terms of our systems and structures, it adds another layer of much needed complexity, right, to the process. So just wanted to offer my thanks to the entire team that's on the Google Meet as well, and those who are not on the Google Meet who work to bring these drafts forward. Really appreciate it.
And we will keep you apprised as we continue to work through. There again, the start times being an integral component to number of days, minutes, and the flexibility that gets generated there within as well.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, Oscar.
Yeah, if I might add, as those of you who were on the board back then remember, during the first meeting that I attended, I spoke about this issue. I talked about the difficulties of being Jewish and not having those days off. And on a personal level, it's really meaningful that this calendar was created. And I think that it's a really, really amazing concrete step towards a more equitable district.
Thank you so much, Oscar, and thank you for your advocacy. I remember that first board report that you gave, and it was really powerful to hear your experience as a student, and that's what this work is about. That's why we're here. So thank you.
Good to hear.
Excellent. Anything else before we end with this item?
I guess one quick question. Do we normally do 1 or 2 years at a time?
Yeah, great question. Excellent. We normally will do 2 years so that we can plan ahead. And we tried last time to look even potentially at 3, depending. We kind of tried to stay within the 2-year cycle because our contracts are bargained every 2 years, and this is a term and condition of bargaining, number of work days and all of those other procedural items for staff. So that's kind of been our 2-year threshold. Sometimes in conversation with the HEA in this last session, we said, well, we can always try to see what a 3-year threshold might look like, but that is our typical time frame.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for all the work.
Yeah, thanks. Nick.
Very welcome. All
Thank
thoughts,
you.
ideas, recommendations, reconsiderations, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Are we going into the hours on the next page or no?
What's that?
Are we going into these too?
The hours?
Yeah.
Questions on that? You mean the,
Start times?
Uh-huh.
yeah,
I'm sorry, were we
We already
planning?
talked about those. Nick walked us through this page already.
At the beginning, to kind of set the context for the instructional days and the hours.
Oh.
Did you have something else you wanted to talk about, though?
And they're draft parameters, so we're still
Okay.
finalizing some of those
Okay,
details.
I was just thinking, so this is just drafts. So this is just to say how many days we needed, not hard and fast start times at this point, or are we thinking they will
well,
be?
that's an excellent question. This is what we are working from right now. These are the parameters that we're looking at as we look at that 3:30 school end time for high school and junior high, and around that 2 o'clock time frame within the elementary, and then as well that 7:30 elementary AM start, and then the 8:50 and 8:50 for high school and junior high.
So I guess I just had one question, because it feels like this whole thing is being driven to that 7:30 start, which is, I mean, that's early, due to this Lindbergh Center thing.
That is
That's our,
insightful and correct.
that's kind of our sticking point. My question is, does the city of Minnetonka use Lindbergh Center in the morning?
No. To my knowledge. Maybe.
What I'm wondering, right, like, and we're not going to be having practices there. Would the city of Minnetonka consider like a 6 to 8 a.m. if we move back to 7 o'clock when they get the Lindbergh? Have we talked to the city of Minnetonka about that hard and fast stop at 6 o'clock?
Not potentially, but it is in the negotiated contract, so we would have to go back to those terms and conditions within that contract. So yes, we would need to go back and look at that collaboratively, but those are some parameters that now might create some options.
I was just thinking, like, there's a lot of people who would prefer to work out, I would think, from 6 to 8 a.m.
Yeah.
than after 6 p.m. at night. Maybe there's a way that they don't get Lindbergh until 7 p.m., which gives us at least, maybe even it's just a 30-minute buffer. But I look at that 7:20 drop-off, if we have kids on the bus for an hour, there's kindergartners being picked up at 6:20 in the morning in December. That could be a sticking point, I would think. And if it could be solved by just maybe trading off and getting Minnetonka to move out an hour, by giving them 2 hours in the morning when Lindbergh isn't being used by our teams at all. I don't know. It was just something I was like, that seems to be driving everything.
I think also what's good to know is 3:30 is the latest secondary school end time out of all of our neighboring districts. So going later than 3:30.
Oh, would affect our
could-
activities anyway.
So that could be an issue. So, and in addition to what you mentioned, having that flexibility with Lindbergh, what I'm curious about is whether or not we can do some tweaking with transportation to figure out whether an hour of turnaround time between the tiers is truly critical. Are there any adjustments we can make with any of our routes to reduce that? Do you see where it says
Hour and-
transition time 1:20? Because if
20.
we could reduce that, that would be, to
That
me,
would be
that'd be a
huge.
lifesaver.
That would be huge,
Because
too.
starting elementary at 7:45 rather than 7:30 it just feels better. And we're also collecting elementary start times from lots of neighboring districts. So
Okay.
there are a lot of districts that are starting
Okay,
at 7:30, 7:45, 8, but
perfect. I
the
just wanted
later
to
the
talk
better.
through that a little bit, because
Yeah.
I was just looking at that 7:20 and thinking about that hour bus ride and thinking about those, you know, that felt like a lot to me, but you're right, 7:45 feels significantly different to me than even 7:30, so.
somehow Eden Prairie committed to not have elementary kids boarding a bus before 7 in the morning.
Really?
But I also think geographically, they may have less of that mile span than we do between Minneapolis and Hopkins, so.
And that
lots
is
of-
the ongoing work, and why we've kind of phrased them here is, we wanted to make sure that we had the framework that could work, and then can we work within that framework to get more toward those desired states?
Okay.
And the desired state here absolutely would be more toward that 7:45 time, and how might we be able to do that, and what could be our flexibility with that?
Right.
Well, I think too, one of the considerations with changing the start times for, that I heard from a lot of students and families, is if junior high and high school starts later, then that pushes sports later. So I think having this 6 PM stop time is good, because then, you know, older students can get to work, can get home, get their schoolwork done. I don't think we want to, even if we could, I don't think we would want to keep pushing it later and later. Just,
Yeah, that makes sense.
it's kind of nice to have this hard stop time.
That
Cool.
does make sense, and I agree, the 7:20 drop-off feels brutally early. And that is a big change, I mean, that's a big change from, like, our kids at Meadowbrook right now.
Yeah.
It's a really
Oh, well,
big
Yeah,
change.
yeah, because we do have the 3-tier right now, right? Like, my kids get on the bus at 9:05. So,
And we have been working and in conversation as well about what that care component would look like in the morning as well with our Kids and Co. staff also. And looking at what those care options are in neighboring districts to make sure that we're really being mindful of the needs of our community to accommodate that as well.
Yeah, and are we still considering a 3-tier? Because I know that was the cheapest option. Or is that just not part of the consideration?
I believe at this point, we're still considering anything that could get us to the most desirable set of times.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I think the tough part, Shannon, with the 3-tier, we'd still be talking about the first tier would still be elementary, because they're earlier. So that would still have a subset of our elementary kids in that early zone. Because our second 2 tiers right now are like 3 elementaries and 3 elementaries.
Yeah, I'm just wondering about the logistics of it, if it was still a consideration or not.
Yeah.
And then Mr. Fisher just wanted the board to know that although there might be residents who want to work out early in the morning, The bigger issue is that there is evening programming through Parks and Rec. That's built into the contract.
Got it.
Makes sense.
Great.
Well, I'm glad you brought it up, Katie. It was good to talk through all of that. Excellent. Anything else on this agenda item?
Is there a deadline for, or is there a goal for deciding the start time separately from the calendar? I know we discussed kind of the calendar.
Yeah,
timeline.
it's an excellent question. I think the goal with the 18th is to look at where we would be with, because right now what the community needs are some of the start time, end time frameworks that they can plan with. What we're also hopeful for is that we can continue, as we've discussed, to kind of modify and adjust and get more close. What we've talked about are being able to provide windows for folks, saying, hey, right now, we know that elementary might be at 7:30. Our goal is to get it as closer to 8 as we can, driving towards some of these pieces. Our goal is to make sure that we have pickups by this period of time, so that we can do some of those items as well. So that will be ongoing work.
Thank you.
Great. Anything else? Okay, thank you, Dr. Lightfoot.
Thank you.
For walking us through all of that.
Thank you, Nick.
And we will end our workshop now. We have an exciting meeting tonight with our new board members being sworn in. And so we'll take a break here and welcome community members into the space. And for those of you joining us via the YouTube live stream, we'll see you back here at 7. Thank you so much. This meeting of the Hopkins School Board is called to order at 7:01 p.m. We are really happy to be back in community with you, in physical community here in the boardroom, and in virtual community with those of you who are joining us via the YouTube live stream. It is a new year. We are a new board, and so I think introductions are in order. Rachel, we'll start with you and then move around the table.
Excellent. I am Rachel Hartland, a mother of 3 Meadowbrook Elementary schoolers, and I am one of the new board members. I'm very happy to be here tonight.
Hi, I'm Katie O'Shea Peterson, Hopkins School Board Clerk.
Steve Adams, Hopkins School Board Treasurer, starting my 11th year on the school board.
Rhoda Mary Puri Reid, Superintendent and ex officio board member.
Jen Westmoreland Bouchard, Board Chair. Really thrilled to be starting my 2nd term with the Hopkins School Board.
Shannon Andreessen, Vice Chair, in my 2nd year, and yeah, excited for our new board members.
Tanya Khan, a director on the Hopkins School Board, and like Shannon, it's my 2nd year. And welcome to all our new members.
Jason Ross, newest member, starting day 1 for the school board. Very excited to be here. And I have 3 children at Tanglin Elementary.
Oscar Wolf, I'm a junior board representative.
Excellent. Thank you all. So our next agenda item is open agenda. This is typically the time when we would hear public comment from our community members. The Hopkins School Board believes that input from our community is crucial for moving forward on Vision 2031. We have 2 options for giving public comment during this period of COVID. So one option is to leave a voicemail before the meeting and have it played publicly at the meeting. We did not receive any voicemails for this evening. The other option is to attend the meeting in person and fill out a public comment card, hand it to me, the chair, before the beginning of the meeting, and I did not receive any public comment cards for this evening. So we will move into our reports. We'll start with our student board representatives' reports, and Oscar, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair Bouchard. Hello, board members, superintendent. As you have probably noticed, I am the only student board representative who was able to make it to today's meeting. And that is because, unfortunately, both Grace and Imani, who were scheduled to be at this meeting, were exposed to COVID, which is exactly what I'm talking about today. I'm not able to give you any statistics or new scientific breakthroughs that you haven't already heard, but what I can offer you is the student experience of COVID right now at Hopkins High School. When I pulled into the parking lot on Monday, I actually thought that I had made a mistake, that I had hit one button too many on my alarm clock and I was there an hour early because there were so few cars. But I was right on time. There were so many COVID absences that the parking lot was visibly more vacant. Today in my math class, there were only 5 other students. Admittedly, it's not a huge class, but 5 other students is not anything I've ever seen before. So for the past 2 days since we've been back from break, I've been asking my fellow students how they feel about COVID, what's going through their heads, what emotions are they feeling right now. And there were really two major groups of students that I've identified, basically. The first group is really indifferent at this point. This pandemic has gone on quite a long time, as we all are familiar with, and a lot of students are tired of it. They're tired of keeping up with all the new rules, all the new restrictions, all the fear and COVID news. They're over it. They don't really care at this point. The other group of students very much cares, and the main sort of characteristic from them is anxiety, really. They're really anxious about what's going to happen with 2 main things. The first thing is they're anxious about COVID itself. They're scared they're going to get COVID. When you are sitting in a classroom an arm's length away from a bunch of other students who you don't really know if they're vaccinated or tested or anything, it's scary and you sort of feel like a sitting duck almost. You feel kind of helpless, where there's not much you can do really. So people are scared that they're going to get COVID. And the other thing that people are really anxious about is what the school is going to do. They don't know whether we're going online again. They don't know whether a hybrid is happening. There's just a lot of unknowns, and I know that, nobody knows. We don't really know what's going to happen with COVID, but that unknown aspect is definitely making a lot of students anxious. Last night, Principal Ballard sent out an email sort of clarifying a lot of aspects, and I thought that that was really helpful, and I would really like to see that trend continue. Because last year and the year before, I felt that students were kind of left out of the loop with a lot of COVID stuff that was happening. I felt that all the information I was getting was coming from emails that were sent to my parents or teachers, and students weren't getting too much information directly. And I think that that sort of plays into that unknown thing that's happening with students. So I think that if there's anything we can do to sort of relieve the anxiety that students are feeling right now, it's if and when any big COVID decisions are made, directly communicating to students what those decisions are. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Oscar. It's so important for us to hear what students are experiencing, and then one of your strengths as a leader is your ability to advocate for specific actions that are needed at specific times, and so I appreciate the direct advocacy as well. We certainly want our students to know what's going on and feel as confident as any of us can at this time when there's a lot of uncertainty. Any comments or questions for Oscar?
I had a question, Oscar. The students who have missed classes, are they able to go online and attend in a way, or?
Right now, I think that mostly depends on what teachers are doing. I know of some teachers who have already, just in anticipation of what might be coming, they've already put all their assignments online. I was talking to some of my friends today who spent the entire class just doing online work because the teachers are putting it there anyway. But I don't think, it comes down to the teacher right now, I think.
Okay. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Oscar. I just want to double check and make sure we don't have any other student board reps on the Google Meet. Okay, well, thank you very much for being here and representing tonight. Next, we'll move to our superintendent's report with Dr. Mary Reid.
Thank you, Chair Bouchard, and good evening to all board members, community members, colleagues in the space. And thank you, Oscar, for your comments. I do have a few slides, but I want to start by thanking you and just acknowledging how difficult this time is. Today, we being all superintendents and school leaders across the entire state of Minnesota, we received an email from our education commissioner, Heather Mueller, and she wanted to remind all of us that our students learn best when they're in the classroom, and that our students' mental and emotional well-being benefit most in the classroom. And at the same time, we know that we need to mitigate very well. We need to watch our positive cases and exposures very closely, and we need to make decisions that are also in the best physical and medical health for our students and staff and for our families. So I just wanted to acknowledge the importance of your comments and let you know that we have leaders at the district office, and also all of our principals, nurses, teacher leaders are really in constant communication. We in fact have maintaining a spreadsheet where we are looking at total number of student absences. So you are right, our high school has a very high absence rate, both yesterday and today. Most of our buildings are around 10% students absent, but yesterday we believe around 400 high school students were absent, and today around 530, which is about 1/3 of our student population at the high school. So and at the same time, when we look at a spreadsheet where we are tracking who is reporting either testing positive for COVID or quarantining because a family member has tested positive, then that number for the high school in particular is under 100. So then, we we theorize that there are also many students who perhaps are fearful of coming to school, would rather check into Canvas and learn in a remote or hybrid fashion for the time being. And again, we're really just watching all of the data, and we want to make decisions that are best both for our students' physical and medical health, but also emotional and psychological health. So thanks very much, and I hope that little bit of information helps you. I just want to build the confidence of our community members that, we're staying on top of really all of our data points. So thank you for that. I do then want to just share a few slides here for this report. Oh, that's not what I want to do. What do you think? One moment. Should be coming through, right?
I think so. We have tech support on the way.
Hey, Steve.
If that's not working, just use the wireless.
It's plugged in.
I don't know why it's, go to wireless presenter,
Okay.
and then go up to the top where you do your Apple TV.
Right here?
I'm not sure what it is on yours. You can go under that way, just do displays. Up under the Apple, system preferences, displays. Not sure how you're set up. Display preferences in there.
Let me put my glasses on.
Okay, AirPlay. Where you should see.
Hmm.
There you go. And we should be seeing that. There you go. 0862. There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay, perfect. Hopefully everyone had time to read the board report for the evening. Sorry for that. I like to show the slides because we take some time to collect wonderful pictures from across our district, and it's really nice to see the faces of our scholars and see them in action. So these are some of our scholars at Gatewood Elementary. I did want to begin by just acknowledging the departure of John Kuhl and Fartun Ahmed, who are wonderful board members who served with us, very people-centered and thoughtful about their board engagement. So thank you to John and Fartun for their service, and a warm welcome to Jason and Rachel. Welcome, and I'm very excited to work with both of you and to have you be part of this entire board. Being a school board member these days, maybe you've read in the news, is very challenging work, and lots of time without lots of pay. And so I deeply appreciate having a strong partnership with our Hopkins School Board. So a little bit more about COVID. Over the break, we had the opportunity to meet with a local epidemiologist who explained, a few things that were helpful to our thinking, and we did put some of this information in a staff and family-facing communication yesterday. So we are obviously learning, not just in the news, but from personal experience, that the Omicron variant transmits very quickly. And we are expected to see many breakthrough cases with Omicron, meaning that for people who are fully vaccinated, there is, because it transmits so easily, there is a chance for lots of vaccinated folks to receive COVID, either for the first time or again. And we were warned that the spread will be quite fierce in our schools, and we are now, seeing that with Oscar's testimony and in some of our numbers, which means that we will also experience increased staffing shortages. So we are watching the numbers of teacher vacancies, paraprofessional vacancies, vacancies on our school nutrition and custodial bus driving teams. And so we are in touch with that data and just being, super creative with how to make sure that vacancies are filled. Today at Eisenhower Elementary, for example, our school principal, Melissa Ness, was filling in for a teacher. We also had our English language learner instructor covering a classroom for a teacher who's out for 10 days due to COVID, and then our instructional coach covering another classroom for a teacher out with COVID. So our principals and their teams are being very creative with how to make sure that students receive effective supervision as well as, enriching education during this time. We are canceling non-essential high-risk activities such as school assemblies that maybe had been planned for January, February. If it's not absolutely critical, then we have asked principals to cancel those activities. We are also, you'll hear later on, we talked about this during the workshop. We'll also cover it later on during the meeting, that we will soon be requiring staff to share their vaccination status and to engage in regular testing if they are not fully vaccinated. Interestingly, we received an update from MDH today that they have named N95 and KN95 masks as being the most effective. Now, KN95 masks are 4 times the cost of the white cloth masks that we do purchase for students and staff. So we will need to look at that. The most important thing is that all of our students and staff do wear a proper face covering that covers both the nose and the mouth. But, we'll have to have a conversation about these more specific types of masks. And of course, we are preparing for potential pivots, knowing that students being in remote learning for lengthy periods of time was not good psychologically, emotionally, socially for our students. Pivoting for a long period of time is not not ideal. But if we get to that staffing shortage threshold, for example, or if 30% or more of our students or staff are positive with COVID and are in quarantine, then we may have to shut down a whole classroom. Hopefully not an entire school, but we really are preparing for those situations should we reach those points. And then the Minnesota Department of Health is still waiting for official guidance from the CDC. You may have read in the news that the CDC has guidance, updated guidance on their website. What we're being told is that this was a media release, and we're still waiting for that guidance to be finalized. And then the Minnesota Department of Health will then provide finalized guidance to districts and schools across the state. So just a little bit of a COVID update for all of us, and I'd welcome questions if folks have them afterward. We also, yes, there are a lot of COVID-induced conditions that we need to navigate during this time, but there's also wonderful things happening in all of our schools. I wanted to share that during the winter break, in an effort to address food insecurities, our Hopkins virtual EDU staff and students packed 250 food bags for families, so that was really a blessing for all of us, and especially for those families. Meadowbrook Elementary, and I think a couple of other elementary sites held bingo events to celebrate the closing of school before the break. Kindergartners at Alice Smith having pajama days. I have a 13-year-old who wears pajamas to junior high, so maybe the junior high and senior high scholars were also having, I don't know, like pajama days that were either part of Studco or just like students deciding I'm wearing pajamas to school.
I think it's just the style now.
Just the style. Flannel, correct? Like white and gray or red and
Only.
black, correct? Okay. Well, it got to be warm and comfy. For Scholars Spotlight, we do try to focus, highlight our scholars who are doing well and really contributing in positive ways to our community. So one of our very own student board members, Elif Otzturk, has been featured in both the Royal Report and the Hopkins Update. And she is a really wonderful contributor who's working with legislators. She's an advocate for the rights of others, and we're really excited to have an opportunity to engage with her, and she's been very impactful in our school and district community. I also wanted at this time especially to highlight the good work of our district and school nurses. So Mary Jo Martin, the woman all the way in the top left-hand corner of your screen, she's our head nurse throughout the district. She provides leadership to all of our school nurses, and then you see the wonderful faces of all of our nurses, and man, these are very, very busy, very caring people who are, extremely well-versed and have a lot of expertise. They attend weekly calls with the Minnesota Department of Health. They are doing contact tracing literally at all hours of the day and night. I think the high school nurse sent an email to staff around 1 o'clock in the morning last night. So we are so thankful for these individuals who have really been through it and are there for all of us in our schools and in our district. So thank you, nurses, if any of you are watching this evening. And then just a final opportunity to have a quick glance at our system goal progress. So one of our system goals is around empathy. And as we think about the continuance of the global pandemic, we want to build our empathy by not just by seeing and recognizing how COVID has detrimentally impacted our students, our families, our staff, but by finding ways to acknowledge and address those negative impacts, whether it's people's individual livelihoods, family livelihoods, schooling experiences, and of course, the mental health state of our students and staff. And that is it. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Mary Perry Reid. Any questions or comments from my board colleagues? Well, a lot of information, and the format that you continue to use with the spotlights has been really wonderful. You started that in the fall, right? And so it's given us an opportunity to really zero in on some of the incredible work that's happening in different spaces across the district. So thank you. With that, I would look for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next, I would look for a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next, we'll move to the treasurer's report with Treasurer Adams.
Thank you, Chair Bouchard. As is customary for the first treasurer's report of the month. I report on enrollment, and as of January 1, we had 3 fewer students than we had since December 1, and that was after an increase of 18 students in October and November. So we're still 214 students over our revised projection and 280 students over our original projection that we made back probably around the May-June timeframe. Expenses of note this time include $5,000 for membership dues for the Lake Conference, $7,650 to the Minnetonka Ice Arena for girls' hockey time. As you may recall, we have a combined girls' hockey team with St. Louis Park. Have had that for about the last 3 years. And they practice at the Minnetonka Ice Arena and play there. We issued a check for $1,912 to the Tanglin PTO for a refund for something called Lexia. They had purchased a subscription to Lexia, which is a supplementary online program for, I believe it's for math for students. And then the district decided that they would extend that opportunity to every school in the district. And so Tanglin got their $1,900 back, so they've got some extra money to use for other purposes. As an indication of what our the impact of COVID is on our district, we cut a check for $171,133 to Teachers on Call for substitute teachers. I'm not sure what the time frame was that this covered, but that shows that we've got a significant impact on our staff as a result of COVID and have to call in substitutes. On December 7th and 10th, we had 2 snow events, and the charge for snow removal was over $16,000 for those 2 days. We have paid for $664 for tickets to A Raisin in the Sun, play at the Guthrie on February 3rd. I'm not sure which class is attending that, but I'm looking forward to attending that play as well. And finally, $39,000 in tuition for Hopkins students to attend Normandale Community College during the fall semester. This is tuition that would normally be paid by parents, except that Hopkins participates in the post-secondary education option, and we will pay tuition for students to attend other schools, post-secondary schools, as part of that program. So we just saved our parents in the district $39,000 in tuition for last fall. So with that, I move that we approve disbursements in the amount of $4,324,931.92 for the period December 8, 2021 through December 28, 2021.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second?
I have a motion and a second to approve the treasurer's report. Any discussion?
Chair Bouchard,
Yes.
our Director of Innovation, Design, and Learning just wants all of us to know that Lexia is for reading, not math.
Ah, thank you.
Just so we're all,
I stand corrected.
we all do, because I thought it was for both, but it's specifically for literacy.
See, it's that lifelong learning mindset. All right, so we still have a motion and a second to approve the treasurer's report. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next, we'll move into new business, and our first agenda item is the administration of the oath of office. We are thrilled to have the Honorable Judge Carruthers with us today, and I'd like to invite him up to the front. And I'd like to invite Rachel and Jason, our new board members, to join me up at the front, and I'll turn it over to you, Clerk Peterson.
Thank you, Chair Bouchard. Thank you, Judge Carruthers. Come on up, guys. You can kind of stand here in front of your fans. Excellent. Thanks for joining us tonight. This is awesome. It is an honor that you are elected to guide the education of our community's children. As you recite the oath of office, you assume a tremendous responsibility as a director of our school district with the duties empowered by the Minnesota legislature. This power puts you and the other members of our school board in the position of being both morally and legally responsible for equitable, quality education of every student in the district. In carrying out this responsibility, you will be asked to fulfill the roles of vision, structure, accountability, and advocacy. In providing vision, the board, with extensive participation of the community, envisions the community's educational future and then formulates the goals, defines the outcomes, and sets the course for the public schools. To achieve the vision, the board establishes a structure and creates an environment designed to ensure all students the opportunity to attain their maximum potential through a sound organizational framework. Because as a board, you must be accountable to the community, you must ensure a continuous assessment of student achievement in all conditions affecting the education of our children. As board members, you serve as education's key advocates on behalf of the students and the community to advance the vision for our schools. Furthermore, you must strive to work together with the superintendent and staff to lead the district towards fulfilling the vision you have created, fostering excellence for every student in the areas of academic skills and knowledge, citizenship, and personal development.
Thank you very much. First of all, welcome everyone to this. It's really my honor to be able to swear in our returning and new school board members. I am a resident of the district, and my wife and I all our 4 children attended Hopkins schools. So let's begin.
I'd like to invite my family to join me.
And I'll have you maybe hold my.
Sounds great.
So please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Jen Bouchard,
I, Jen Bouchard,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Minnesota,
and the Constitution of the State of Minnesota,
and that I will discharge faithfully
and that I will discharge faithfully
the duties of school board member
the duties of school board member
of Independent School District 270,
of Independent School District 270,
the Hopkins School District,
the Hopkins School District,
to the best of my judgment and ability.
to the best of my judgment and ability.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm doing these in alphabetic order, so our next new member is Rachel Hartland. Please hold the mic, and do you want to call your
Perfect.
family up?
And yes, I would like to call my family up. Come on, family.
Please repeat after me. I, Rachel Hartland,
I, Rachel Hartland,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Minnesota,
and the Constitution of the State of Minnesota,
and that I will discharge faithfully
and that I will discharge faithfully
the duties of the office
the duties of the office
of school board member
of school board member
of Independent School District 270,
of Independent School District 270,
the Hopkins School District,
the Hopkins School District,
to the best of my judgment and ability.
to the best of my judgment and ability.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And I would like to welcome my wife and kids up as well.
And you're going to raise your right hand. I, Jason Ross,
I, Jason Ross,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Minnesota,
and the Constitution of the State of Minnesota,
and that I will discharge faithfully
and I will discharge faithfully
the duties of the office
the duties of the office
of school board member
of School Board Member
of Independent School District 270,
of Independent School District 270,
the Hopkins School District,
the Hopkins School District,
to the best of my judgment and ability.
to the best of my judgment and ability.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you for this honor.
Thank you very much.
Jason and Jen and Rachel, we just need you to sign your lives away. I need a date and a signature at each X from each of you, and then Judge Carruthers will notarize those for us and make it official.
There's two signature lines.
Yeah, date.
There
Yeah.
and there.
So date, signature, date, signature. Perfect. Thank you, Judge Carruthers.
You're welcome.
Steve, you want me to do some stand-up with this? She's funny. Stop, Steve.
I know, right?
That's nice.
Have you ever done stand-up?
Thank you, Judge Carruthers.
Thank you, Judge Carruthers. We hope we get to see you again in 2 years. Wonderful. So next we'll move into our board officers and committee assignments. We discussed this during our workshop right before the meeting. And the first step in this process is to seek nominations for the board officer positions. Robert's Rules requires that I seek the nominations 3 times, which, because we only have one candidate for each of the officer positions, will seem a little redundant, so I wanted to let you know what I was doing. So we'll start with the position of chair. Are there any nominations?
I nominate Jen Bouchard
We
for
have
chair.
One nomination for Jen Bouchard for chair. Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, all in favor of Jen Bouchard being board chair for the next calendar year, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Well, there wasn't a motion, but nomination confirmed. Next, we'll seek a nomination for the role of vice chair. I'd like to nominate Shannon Andreessen. Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Any other nominations? See none. Oh, we have to accept the nominations?
I don't know, I'm just asking.
Shannon, do you accept the nomination for vice chair?
I didn't know if that's part of the
I apologize. I implicitly accepted my own nomination. So, great. The nomination has been accepted. All in favor of Shannon Andreessen serving as vice chair for the coming calendar year, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Nomination confirmed. Now seeking nominations for the role of treasurer.
I nominate Steve Adams.
Director Adams, do you accept the nomination?
I do, Chair Bouchard.
Excellent. Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Seeing none, all in favor of Steve Adams serving as treasurer for this calendar year, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Nomination confirmed. Next, seeking nominations for the role of clerk.
Chair, I nominate, what's her name? Katie Peterson.
Director Peterson, do you accept the nomination?
Gladly.
Excellent. Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Seeing none, all in favor of Katie Peterson serving as clerk for the calendar year, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Nomination confirmed. We discussed, yes, congratulations to all the officers, and thank you for helping me with the procedure. I only do this once a year. So next we'll move into our committee assignments, and we discussed these during the workshop. In real time, I updated a Google Doc that is linked to the workshop packet, so our community members can access that and see who will be serving on our different board committees. And so what we will do now as a board is confirm or to vote on the second piece of the recommendation. So I would look for a motion that the board members appointed to serve as representatives to the organizations and committees for 2022 be approved.
I so move.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next, we will move to our Hopkins Public Schools COVID-19 vaccination and testing policy, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Mary Perry Reid.
Thank you very much, Chair Bouchard, and welcome to the table, Dr. Lightfoot. So earlier during the workshop, we also discussed this topic, which pertains to vaccination mandate. And although the ongoing pandemic has been challenging for all of us, we are entering a time where we need to follow state law and ask our staff members to share with us their vaccination status or participate in a regular testing regimen. And so Dr. Lightfoot will talk about the history behind the state law that stems from a federal policy, and then the process that our district is preparing to embark on to enforce this policy. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the board. Good to be with you this evening. As we discussed in the workshop, this policy was originally presented to the board in November when we were anticipating prior requirements to be enacted within the month of December. There were judicial actions of staying that OSHA regulation, which was put forward, and as such, we've had the policy on hold. Further legal clarification and the adoption yesterday of the federal emergency temporary standard by Minnesota OSHA, and the indication that Minnesota OSHA would start enforcing this work and the regulation that is to come from it as of January 10th, necessitates that we take a look at the policy this evening. As such, in our discussion, it was noted that originally when the policy was presented to you, we had gone over all of those options that were available and that we had recommended that we look at vaccination information being collected from staff and that those who were not vaccinated be offered an opportunity to test so that we would be providing testing protocols within the policy as well. So within the policy, you will see all of that information captured, as was also noted at the workshop. The dates that were intended with the original draft were left as part of that work. What I would advise is that within its recommendation that the board also note that February 9th identified through Minnesota OSHA that they will begin enforcing our testing protocols. So the dates that will be noted in the policy will be changed to reflect and backdate those dates of required vaccinations to make sure that we have all of our information correct to begin testing protocols on February 9th. Other than that, based on our workshop conversation, the policy is as it stands in front of the school board, with that exception of the dates that we would be modifying, and I would be available for any questions, or if I could provide any further details, would be happy to do so.
Thank you very much. We appreciated the opportunity to first discuss this policy as a full board in November, and then have an opportunity to discuss it further during the workshop this evening before the meeting. And want to thank all of the staff who worked really hard to draft the policy, as well as our monitoring committee that reviewed the policy before it came to the board in November. Any questions or comments from my board colleagues for Dr. Lightfoot?
Chair Bouchard.
Yes, Director Adams.
Nick, does this policy apply to school board members? Are we considered to be employees?
It's an excellent question. So here's the distinction under Minnesota OSHA. As employees, employees are specific to the organization. So this policy is applicable to employees under Minnesota regulation. You as board members are not in theory employees, you are elected officials. So there is a distinction, as there is a distinction through independent contractors. So while the regulations are required for employees, the regulations are not required for independent contractors. As governmental officials, those are distinctions as well. So it's an excellent distinction. It doesn't mean that the board can't extend those. It does mean, however, that the Minnesota OSHA regulations did not require that.
Thank you. I would just like to go on record as saying that I intend to comply with the policy.
Excellent. Any other comments or questions? Okay, I would look for a motion that the board conditionally approve the proposed Hopkins Public Schools COVID-19 vaccination and testing policy.
I so move.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second?
I have a motion and a second to conditionally approve the Hopkins Public Schools COVID-19 vaccination and testing policy. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Next, we'll move to our resolution calling for an executive session, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Mary Perry Reid.
Thank you, Chair Bouchard. We would like board approval to go into a closed executive session so that board members may receive an update about our Hopkins Education Association negotiations process, which will be provided by Dr. Lightfoot and Director Chapanduka. I'm not sure if others, is that just the three of us? Okay, so the three of us will be providing you with that update, and as is our practice, we would do that in closed session.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Dr. Mary Perry Reid? This is a resolution, so procedurally, we need to do a roll call vote on this. So I know our clerk is up to the task. So I would look for a motion that the board approve the following resolution. It is hereby resolved that the School Board of Independent School District 270, Hopkins, Minnesota, meet in executive session to discuss negotiation strategy related to the HEA contract for the 21-22 and 22-23 school years, that the meeting be held virtually and commence immediately following the adjournment of this regular meeting. Further, that it be noted that all board members, superintendent, and clerk were duly notified of intention to call this executive session.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the resolution. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Clerk Peterson.
Director Adams.
Aye.
Vice Chair Andreessen.
Aye.
Director Hartland.
Aye.
Director Khan.
Aye.
Director Peterson. Aye. Director Ross.
Aye.
Chair Bouchard.
Aye. Thank you, Clerk Peterson. We have 7 ayes, 0 nays. Motion carries. Next, we can move into our board member reports. Who would like to go first?
Well, I'll go.
Great.
I don't have much to report. It was restful for the most part, winter break. But CFAC did meet during the winter break.
Wow.
And we had our first meeting on December 16th and welcomed a new member to CFAC, May Blatz. She's a Xinjiang and high school parent. And I had the good fortune to serve on the Minnetonka Planning Commission with May, 12 years ago, something like that. And find her to be of excellent judgment, so I'm looking forward to having her on the CFAC committee. The second CFAC meeting on December 30th was canceled because of a flight cancellation for Torero. But we're meeting tomorrow morning again at 8, and we're going to move forward with our deliberations and ultimately a recommendation to the board regarding what our budget parameters should be for the next year.
Excellent, thank you.
Chair Bouchard?
Yes, Vice Chair Andreessen.
The LAC has also been meeting. We're all spending the winter break working on our position papers so that we will be ready for the legislative breakfast and presenting all of that information. And also District 287 board met on I think the 30th, December 30th, to pass a resolution to move forward with a contract for Marcy Dowd becoming the superintendent of 287. And I think that's it.
Great, thank you. Any other board member reports? So mine is essentially an update on some professional development that I've been doing. So as board members, kind of depending on where we are in our journey as a board director, depending on our own personal experience and background and professional experience we bring to the work, we identify as individuals knowledge gaps or things that we're curious about in areas that we believe we need to be stronger in order to serve our district well. So part of my professional development plan over the past year has been deepening my understanding of the relationship between public schools and the criminal justice system. And this is frequently referred to as the school to prison pipeline. So as somebody who has worked in high schools and higher ed contexts, I've spent most of my career working at a community college. I've certainly witnessed the harmful impacts of exclusionary discipline practices and the detrimental impacts of the criminal justice system on my students, on their families, especially when it comes to opportunities for meaningful academic and professional advancement. But as somebody who's been shielded largely from the criminal justice system as a result of my racial and economic privilege, I personally have a lot to learn about it. So over the past year, I've been seeking out the perspectives of people in our community who have been impacted by or worked within the criminal justice system. And these conversations have been incredibly helpful for me in understanding my responsibility as a school board member and as a community leader. We've talked about the importance of data-driven and holistic approaches to making our communities safe, the need to address the economic impacts and trauma that are caused by systemic oppression and of course have been made worse by the pandemic, and the need for defining what meaningful justice looks like for our community members who have been harmed, as well as restoration and transformation so these things don't happen again. And so I wanted to offer a few resources to my board colleagues and to our community members, because I know that there's been a lot of conversation lately in our community about what it means to be safe and our roles and responsibilities within these systems. So the first resource is a Princeton sociologist named Patrick Sharkey, who's done really in-depth research on what safety means in communities and how to achieve it through collaborative partnerships. And so his last name is spelled Sharkey, Patrick Sharkey. And the second is Danielle Sered. Her last name is spelled Sered, from the organization Common Justice, that works with survivors of crimes and seeks to implement restorative practices that keep communities safer overall. So both of these really brilliant visionaries in the field have books, websites, they've been guests on multiple podcasts, and so there are lots of different options for accessing this information that align best with your learning style and how you prefer to access and process information. So just wanted to take some time to share those resources. Okay, well, with that, I would look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I have a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Oh, we were having so much fun, I guess. I have a motion, a second to adjourn. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The motion carries. This meeting of the Hopkins School Board is adjourned at 7:57 PM.